A demonstration of a still life in chalk pastels from Observation. I used my shading grid for a reference and a range of chalks. This is the still life setup that I worked from. On brown pastel paper, I began drawing in white chalk pastel. The coloured paper makes it easy to see the light and dark against the neutral coloured background. Don't forget to use parallel lines when drawing the box. Remember back to the previous exercise. Don't be tempted to use a ruler. If you do make any mistakes, it is easy enough to fix them when you're shading. Don't forget to note the direction of your light source and begin then by blocking in the lightest areas first. Using the side of a piece of chalk renders this very quickly. It may help to shine a light on your still life to be able to obtain shadows in the direction where you want them. Don't forget to note in the shadows and mark in the dark areas. The cast shadows are the shadows that are underneath the object. These are often the darkest. Contrast your tones to add depth. Next to where you will have something very dark, if you look, you will have something very light. Shadows help to weight down your objects and make them look more solid. Here I am trying to block in areas of tone, again using the side of a piece of chalk. Next I will add mid-tones and strengthen my tones to try and block out the paper. This will help the objects to look more solid. Smaller pieces of chalk used on the side are much easier to use. I am layering an overlapping chalk to try and blend it, so I am working the chalks into each other. I am trying to really capture the light areas. And notice the reflected light, the white from the box reflecting back up onto the egg. Reflected light is light that is reflected back up onto the object. So I'm blocking in the background quickly. Later I'll go back over it to block off more of the paper. Now I'm adding some tone to the egg. The changes of tone on the egg are more gradual than the sharp changes in tone on the box. I will come back and blend these later. I am adding dark cast shadows cast from the egg onto the box. I am keeping these quite dark to weight down the egg. The changes of tone at the edges of the box are more dramatic than the changes of tone on the egg, which are more gradual. Cast shadows are usually the darkest tones. These are the shadows that are cast underneath the objects. For example, the shadows under the eggs and the shadows underneath the box. The dark cast shadows usually help to weight the objects down. Darkening behind an object can throw it forward. Here I am darkening behind the egg, and then I will come back later and lighten the egg itself. This contrast in the light and the dark helps also to define the edges. Next, I will block in more of the dark side of the box, the side that is away from the light. I laid down the darkest first and then added more of a dark grey to the black, overworking them to blend them together. I really want to contrast the light against the dark for the sharp changes in tone, where the surfaces, also known as the planes, change direction. I will then add shadow behind the box, the shadow that is cast from the box onto the background. This will help to add depth. You'll notice when you're working with chalk, you often need to go over it, to neaten it up, to lighten it. It tends to blend as you're working. To avoid this, you can use spray fixative, and when it is dry, come back and add more detail. I am trying now to block in more of the still life. I need at least one layer of chalk down so that I can then work over it and have something to blend into. This will help to achieve more of the mid-tones and the gradual changes in tone. Pencils can be used to help achieve detail. The shading grid can also be useful to use as a reference, as a guide to make sure that you remember to include a large range of tones. Now for the fun bit. Smudging chalk can help soften the blending of tones and make the piece look more finished. It can also block out the paper underneath. You can smudge using your fingers. I do this as I find I have more control, but if you prefer, you can use a smudging tool. I'm adding another layer of chalk to strengthen the tones. I really want to contrast the light against the dark, so when the piece is up on the wall, it jumps off the page at you. As you work, don't forget to keep referring to the still life setup and follow the light and shade that you see. Observation is very important. Good amount of chalk laid down to be able to smudge it. If not, when you smudge, it tends to come away from the paper and end up on your hand and very little chalk left on the actual surface of the paper. We are modelling here with light and shade. We are modelling with tone, as we want to give the illusion of 3D on a 2D surface. Again, I am neatening the edges and bringing up the contrast. You can see how it defines the edges. Again here I'm going to darken behind the egg to throw the egg forward. fixative. Here are some other examples of work in chalks.